Scripture before the lesson will be found in Hebrews chapter 13, verses 12 through 14. Again, that's Hebrews 13, 12 through 14. Therefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people through his own blood, suffered outside the gate. So let us go out to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come.
I'd like to mark it at this time. The song after the lesson will be 935. 935. And I'm going to ask you to stand one more time as you turn to number 674. 674. Excuse me. 674. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back, no turning back. Though none go with me, I still will follow. Though none go with me, I still will follow. Though none go with me, I still will follow. No turning back, no turning back. Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? Will you decide now to follow Jesus? No turning back, no turning back. Amen. Please be seated.
I got thinking the other day, the presidential campaigns are kind of like the Olympics. I was trying to think of some similarities because they happen every 4 years. Each category has a definite winner. There's incredible focus and determination. But probably the biggest difference is one of them involves more trash talk than the other one, probably. But it's kind of a curse and a blessing. It's probably been on your minds too. You can't really turn on the news or overhear a conversation and people are talking about the campaigns, and we kind of shake our heads at the mudslinging, and at the same time we kind of also appreciate the fact that we live in a country that allows us to sling mud, and it's kind of a bittersweet kind of things. But no matter how ugly things get between now and November, you might be surprised. I'm talking about this kind of early in the game, so to speak. The show might get a little embarrassing, but even if you take a brief glimpse at other times and places, it makes you appreciate how fortunate we are to live in the country that we do. You realize it when you kind of take a look at other ways of doing things. We have a very unusual way of shifting power. It's very strangely peaceful compared to how things are usually handled. When you hand the power over to a new leader, most empires, it does not go well at all. Other times, other empires, when there's a change of power, it's usually violent. That's usually a standard procedure. And many times the new leader would kill the old leader, if you can imagine living in that kind of situation. So we are very blessed. It's kind of a good reminder as I watch the silliness sometimes to realize that we have it pretty good compared to other situations. Change in power was often violent in other times and places. It was a matter of life and death. And not just for the candidates. Your affiliation could cost you your life in other times and places. If you can imagine, if things didn't go the way that you want in November, Maybe instead of just growling at the TV while your candidate is losing, can you imagine being really worried because if your hero loses, it's going to be time to pack and flee for the border? Many times there were a lot of circumstances like that where those who supported the losing side had to run for their lives. I'm so grateful that that's not our situation. And it was all the more reason for those people to make sure that you were connected to the right guy. Backing the wrong candidate could mean losing everything, including your life. And the reason I bring all this up is for comparison. We're going to talk about the reign of King David. His popularity at one point was on the wane. It was dropping pretty severely. It took a dive, and there was no election, of course. But his son Absalom undermined his power and had very, unkindly arranged things to damage his father's position. He did the equivalent of extensive campaigning against his father and used tactics that would have made a modern mudslinger proud. But before David fully realized it, his son Absalom swayed the hearts of the people. It was a very scary situation, and he was going to take over the kingdom. And have you seen those photos? You've probably seen these photos where the president that was in power is exiting and waving goodbye. This is perfect timing. Yeah. Just a lot like a baby at a church building. But an ex-president will have to say goodbye, and he'll just go into the helicopter. You've seen probably photographs of famous presidents, and they're having to leave. It's the end of their term, and they're getting on the helicopter. When Absalom was approaching, David was not allowed such a gracious farewell. He was being chased out of his position. In this kingdom, it was standard procedure to kill your predecessor. If you can imagine that happening. And alongside, and with that, anyone who supported them, including especially their family. David and all the people that were connected with them had to run for their lives. That's the situation that we're talking about. And David had enough warning, so he gave orders for everyone to evacuate the palace. And he was accompanied by numerous supporters. And the plan would be is that they would slip out the back as Absalom came storming in the front. And if you go to 2 Samuel 15, I'm going to point out a few details about this event. So Absalom's coming into power, and David is on his way out, being forced to leave the throne. And everybody who's connected with David is going to have to leave too, just for their own safety. 2 Samuel 15, verse 13 says, Then a messenger came to David saying, The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. This is really bad news. And in verse 14, David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, Arise and let us flee, for otherwise none of us will escape from Absalom. Go in haste, or he will overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. Then the king's servants said to the king, Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king chooses. So it's kind of bittersweet. The people in general now support Absalom, but David still has people who are loyal to him. And that must have been some encouragement to him that he was not going to have to escape alone. These people are saying, Great, we're ready to go. We're in a hurry, but we're with you. And together with David, they're going to become refugees. They packed up, and they're leaving behind the glory that David once had. Just as they're about to leave, to actually exit the royal property, David pauses in surprise. There's a group of about 600 people, and it's among the refugees that are packed up, ready to go, and he doesn't expect them to be there. It's about 600 people, and he's startled by their presence there, and here's why. Here's 2 Samuel 15, verse 18. He did not expect this. Now all his servants passed on beside him. Those are the ones he expected. All the Cherethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had come with him from Gath, passed on before the king. So he didn't expect to see the Gittites. This group called the Gittites is led by a man with an unusual name. His name was Ittai, I-T-T-A-I. And apparently this man, Ittai, was a Philistine, and he had just recently arrived to join David. Turns out his timing's horrible. He arrives to be a part of David's situation, and he's arriving at an empire that's suddenly volatile. And Ittai and his people had just unpacked, and now here they were packed again, and they're joining this emergency evacuation with David. But David, like I say, he's startled that they're there, and he stops this man. This is 2 Samuel 15:19. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why will you go with us? Return and remain with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place. You came only yesterday. And shall I today make you wander with us while I go where I will? Return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you." So David admires this guy, and he's startled to see these 600 people and this guy named Ittai. And David says, "Stay. You've got no reason to go. Support the new king. You need to stay here." It says, "We're going to be out wandering. We're not going to have a home like this. If you stick with me, it's not going to be a good life for you." It just doesn't make sense for Ittai to go with David. He and his people, Ittai and his people, had every reason to stay behind, to ditch King David, like most of the people would be doing. King David was giving him an out. In fact, King David gave him several outs. Things were not going to go well for the pro-David people. Anyone connected with David would be in great danger. So the logical choice here, you put yourself in Ittai's shoes, is not to be connected with them. I mean, he just got there. It'd be pretty easy for him to kind of shift position and not be a David supporter. Many others had strong ties with David, and they'd be too strong to be denied. When you're related to David, you wouldn't be able to deny that. And there's a lot of others who had openly supported him for a long time, so they didn't really have a choice. Their connections were too strong and too obvious to deny. For them, it was either leave or die. That's their choices. But the situation is different for Ittai, and I find him very interesting. If he stayed, he'd probably be all right. He could, if Absalom came in the door and said, "Hello, I'm Ittai, I'm ready to support you. Congratulations on your throne." That'd be certainly a lot better than scurrying around living the life of a nomad with this ex-king David. So King David makes it easy on him, and he gave Ittai more than one reason to not follow him. And here's some of the reasons. I don't know if you caught these. First, he told Ittai, he says, "You're a foreigner. You're an outsider. You're a Philistine. You have no real political loyalty that you have to back here. You might think he was registered as an independent. There's nothing that's going to tie him in any strong way." No one would have thought twice if Ittai turned back and said, "This isn't my fight. I'm not pro-David or anti-David. I'm not even from here. I'm not part of this. I'm an outsider." So David gives him that. Says, "You can leave for that reason. You're an outsider." Second good reason to not follow David, he just got there. I don't know if you caught it. He said, you got here yesterday. Not only was he from far away, he had just walked in the door. Just because you walk into the middle of a big problem doesn't necessarily make it your big problem. We've probably already all been in those situations where you walk and say, "There's clearly a problem here." If you just walked in the door's right behind you. It's so easy to turn around and walk out. Not your problem. He could have done a 180 and gone back to some kind of safer position. No one there would have blamed Ittai if he had not followed David, including David himself. For this man, there were enough reasons to not follow the true king. And when you're reading about this, it's easy to see some parallels for us. I believe we're a lot like this man named Ittai. We're following a king. In fact, we're following the King of Kings. It's important to think of it that way. If you took all the kings that ever lived, all the czars, all the dictators, and put them in a big room, our king is the king of those kings. He's the main king. And just like David, he's not popular. Just like David, there's a lot of animosity towards him. I'm not talking about the ramped-down, custom-made Messiah that more people are familiar with. The one with the worldly frills, he's popular, certainly popular, but not Jesus, not the one that the Bible describes, the one that demands complete devotion. He's not so popular. Don't be fooled by the religious ambience around us. Despite the popularity of the Christian concept, the majority are not following Jesus. Jesus even said himself, Matthew 7:14, "For the gate is small, and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it," maybe fewer than we think. And this puts the King of Kings at odds, not with just the world, but the religious world, the very ones who claim to know him. And the world is headed one way, and Jesus is going the other, moving in completely opposite directions. And that means we have a choice to make. A lot like Ittai. There are reasons for us to not follow the king. You can follow the low impact version or just be a part of the world. There are some reasons to not follow Jesus for real. First of all, Matthew 5:11, Jesus is up front here too. He says you're going to be insulted, you're going to be persecuted. People are going to say bad stuff about you when you try to do the right thing. You're not going to get a pat on the back all the time. This will happen if you choose to follow the King of Kings. It just goes with the territory. The world's not just going to be irritated with you. The world is going to hate you. That's how God describes it. John 17:14. "I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world." And 1 John 3:13 we looked at recently. "Do not be surprised, brethren, if the world hates you." That does not mean people are going to be camped out on your lawn screaming at you, but there's going to be some animosity. Sometimes admiration, but when you really buckle down and do the right thing, that's not going to go over well. There's going to be some hatred, whether it's spoken or not. And sometimes you will be admired, but when it comes time to really make a stand for the truth, it's not going to be popular. So there's some reasons, just like for Ittai, there are some reasons for you not to follow the King of Kings. When you're baptized, that's you making a choice to be devoted to the King, no matter what. It's a covenant agreement. And our situation is a lot like this man Ittai, but the huge difference between us and him is we make his choice every day. It starts with baptism, and then every day we make that choice to follow the King. And every day the world will provide reasons for you to turn your back on the King. It's called sin. And you will be given all kinds of excuses, far more than Ittai had. You'll be given all kinds of reasons that it will be okay to choose sin. Our enemy will fashion a package deal for you, offering you ways to rationalize and to make you feel justified about doing the wrong thing. In fact, I believe we live in a time when more than ever before, people are lined up to give you excuses. You are surrounded by too much peer pressure, your genetic makeup, your parents, your demographic, your income, vitamin deficiencies, you name it. If you want reasons to do the wrong thing, to indulge yourself and what your desires are, to sin, to turn your back on the King, you can have the variety pack. It is available to you. But regardless of our excuses, there's a promise that God makes that defies all the excuses. And it's a promise made by our Father. And it's about when we face temptation, when the next time comes, when sin comes knocking and offers us that choice, when we're confronted with this choice. It's 1 Corinthians 10:13, and we read it often, but it's a promise. And maybe you think of it in terms of Ittai's choice. "No temptation is overtaking you, but as such as common to man, and God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that you will be able to endure it." Ittai could have stayed and become part of the wrong side, but God provided an escape with the true King for him. In other words, you will always have a choice about whether or not to follow the King. That choice will never be taken away from you. So considering Ittai this morning, it helps me to kind of put myself in his position. He was making an important choice, a life-changing choice. If he followed David, it was going to be a hard road. He's walking out of a palace. I mean, it's pretty nice there, but he's leaving that behind. Surrounded by people who would understand if he were to opt out. He's surrounded by all kinds of people saying, "You're good, it's okay. You can leave. He would have to choose a different road, and there's lots of seemingly good reasons to not follow the true king, but Ittai didn't choose a different road. He was determined to stick with David, and it's because Ittai knew something really important. If you're smart, you follow the true king no matter where he's going. The palace doesn't matter. The people don't matter. Or is this the true king? That's where I'm going. Even if that true king's headed out the back door to be separated from everything and to be faced with ridicule, heading towards trouble and a difficult life, you follow the true king. A whole bunch of excuses are there to choose from, but Ittai, he had all kinds of excuses there waiting. He wasn't interested in excuses. When David offered Ittai an out, this is Ittai's response. I didn't read this part. I like this about Ittai. 2 Samuel 15:21. So keep this in mind. Everything's changing as far as the shifting of power. David gives him all kinds of outs, and this is Ittai's response in 2 Samuel 15:21, and I think this is a good example for us. But Ittai answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, as my lord the king lives, surely wherever my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant will be." I really love that about this guy. You picture the conversation. David's walking out the back, and he says, "What are you doing? You don't have anything in this. You don't have anything to do with this." He gives him there's all kinds of reasons for you not to go with me. And Ittai says, "I'm going with you. Wherever you find King David, that's where you'll find me." And this wasn't an easy choice. It wasn't the popular choice, but it was the right choice. And in return, King David accepted this man's loyalty. Here's David's response to Ittai in verse 22. Therefore, David said to Ittai, "Go and pass over." So Ittai the Gittite passed over with all his men and all the little ones who were with him. So Ittai fell in behind David and marched out of the city with the true king on a very dark day. Later, I'm sure you're well aware of this, King David was able to return in triumph. And guess who was with him? Guess who returned with all the loyal people? Among them was a man named Ittai. And I like that about him. I think he's a good example for me, and I would like to offer him as an example to you. Ittai followed David, and he left the city of Jerusalem. He followed the true king through difficult times, and he followed the king to wonderful times. Strangely enough, we're expected to do the same. If you look at Hebrews 13, when Jesus was crucified, many parallels here. Like David, his popularity had dropped severely to the point of being executed by the people. If you go to Hebrews 13:12, Jesus was also forced to leave the city like David. And in turn, Jesus expects us to do the same. Here's Hebrews 13:12. Therefore, Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people through his own blood, suffered outside the gate. So let us go out to him outside the gate, outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come. And this, of course, is talking about our choices. When we're baptized, it's described as being crucified with him. And I would, before we wrap this up, it's so important to encourage anyone who hasn't been baptized to make that choice as soon as possible. It's so vital so that you and God are all right. This world is like a temporary city, and we're headed toward a more permanent one. Being baptized is like choosing to be crucified with the king so that you can live again like the king. It's like leaving with David so that you can return with him in triumph. But it means making that choice to leave the city every day. And this means every day we make the choice to be like the world, or to make sure our devotion to the true king is made very clear. But in all our choices, we follow the true king every day. Like Ittai, we're ready to leave anything behind, ready to follow a difficult road, and we're not interested in excuses. That's because we know what Ittai knew. If you're smart, you follow the true king no matter what. Pray you'll think about this while we stand together and sing.